Greetings, here we go. We're going to talk about token economies and a few other systems about how we actually turn around and apply all these things. And I know that this is a bit of a summary from your textbook, but I've got some additional things that I'll add in here as we go. But I don't know, let's just get rolling. Here we go. All right, first things first, behavioral contracting. There's a lot of different levels of behavioral contracting that you can employ. There's some pitfalls with each of these things depending on how you do it, and so on and so forth. So let's just talk about what the behavioral contract is, how it's used, and maybe a little bit of the information behind it. So, all right, target behaviors. Basically, the idea is, what behavior do we want? We have to have that in the behavioral contract. So the idea with the contract, again, is you're going to do a written contract, and you will put your goals and things like that, and then we'll talk about those in a second. But it's to help you achieve whatever new behavior it is that you're trying to do, or whatever behavior you're trying to change. It's just an additional method to kind of keep you on track. Now, importantly, I should note that there's quite a bit of research behind adding a behavioral contract and whether or not that actually improves the likelihood that you're going to be successful in your change plan, whatever that change plan may be. And of course, this may be something that you're doing for yourself, or it may be something that you're doing with others, or maybe you're getting a behavioral contract together with a student, or whatever the case may be. But every time we do the research, it's pretty clear behavioral contracting does add one level of support, and it usually improves the likelihood that you'll change whatever behavior it is that you're trying to change. Again, I'm kind of talking about it from a self-management perspective here, but it can be applied in any sort of arena. You could contract with a student that is, of course it would have to be verbal, but contracting with a student would be a good thing. Right? So again, we're going to identify target behaviors and the reinforcers and or rewards that you're going to use to try and get those behaviors to maintain. Right? Ultimately, the contract just serves as a prompt. Right? That's all it is. It's essentially an SD. It doesn't do anything else. There's some people are like, well, it locks you into it, and breaking it then it produces some sort of punishment. No, I don't think so, because there's no real consequence. I mean, you can add consequences for violating the behavioral contract, but at the same time, you'd have to enforce them, and it gets hard. So really it is just about an SD saying, I am going to do this, and it serves as a visual prompt in order to make that happen. It may be, again, what type of SD is it? Well, it may be a discriminative stimulus to actually escape failure, right? So if you're going to, failing at a change plan, either with a student or with yourself, is not a very fun thing to do. If you're trying to make a change and then you fail at making those changes, then that's not a good feeling, right? So a behavioral contract may be a discriminative stimulus to help you avoid that. So a sort of negative set up a negative reinforcing situation where you're avoiding failure, and that is what's kind of keeping you going, as you will. All right. Right off the bat, it uses rule following behavior. That is the whole core here, which there's an inherent problem with that. And it is what it is. Well, pretty straightforward. As you might imagine, that if you can't follow rules, then how would a behavioral contract work? Well, what do you mean by that, Ryan? Well, I mean that most likely you've already tried to establish some rules for yourself or for somebody else, and that person or yourself is having trouble following those rules. Otherwise you wouldn't need the behavioral contract, and a behavioral contract is nothing more than a written form of rules. So it's entirely possible that, guess what? That you need to teach a different skill in order for this stuff to work. So you might need to teach somebody or focus on rule following behavior, or you might want to avoid the use of a behavioral contract with someone that does not follow the rules. You want every stakeholder, you want them to participate in the development of this contract. Parents, teachers, the client, whoever else is involved, right? They have to have a say. They have to all agree. We want this child to be at level X by a certain amount of time. Here's what we're going to do to make sure that happens. Here's what the child is going to do in order to make sure that happens as well. Right? So you do need all those people involved. That way everybody feels like they have a stake in it. Again, they're stakeholders, so we want to make sure they feel like they have a stake and that they've had some input on making sure that this kiddo achieves the goals that we want them to achieve. Right? So let's break this into the pieces. All right. Right off the bat, the task. Who's going to do it? What are they going to do? In other words, what's the desired behavior? When are they going to do it? In other words, what's the frequency? And how well? All right, this is the topography, right? So the details of the response. How are you going to do that? If this was a math assignment or something like that, I may talk about, maybe you got a student that's having troubles with math assignments, so you could develop a behavioral contract that they must get them right, or they must show their work. Depending on what sort of problem you're after there, or trying to solve, there will be different responses to the how well thing. But this is basically just an additional criteria on the behavior itself. Completing your homework isn't enough. Completing it accurately, legibly, and getting a passing grade on it. Now that's that really gets at what we're after. And of course you can include subtasks in this how well. Think of that math assignment. Completing the math assignment isn't just that. There's a bunch of behaviors involved in that. So maybe we need to include those behaviors in the behavioral contract. All right. So what else? What's the reward? Right? Well, in other words, obviously we would really talk about this as reinforcers, but we only hope they're reinforcers. We don't know ahead of time. Right? It has to be really specific. What are these rewards? What are these reinforcers that you're going to earn? How are you going to earn it? Be extremely detailed about what the reinforcer is. Is it money? If so, how much? Are you on a token system? If so, how many tokens do you get? All those different things. Right? Who is going to be doing the reinforcing? Right? Who will be delivering the reinforcers for the contract? If this is self-management, if you're doing a self-management type contract, then of course you're delivering the reinforcers yourself, and there's some dramatic problems with that, and it might not even be a good idea, but it might be the only option you got. Is the teacher going to be delivering the reinforcers? Well, if so, is the teacher going to be able to? Right? So, you've got to take a lot into account here, and this is why we like to include all the stakeholders. So, exactly what is the reward? Specified. Is it extra time at recess? Is it, a cookie? Who knows what it is? But you do need to be clear. When are you actually going to deliver the rewards, which might be reinforcers, right? And ultimately, it must be contingent upon the behavior. The behavior happens. How quickly are you going to deliver the reinforcer? Are you going to deliver it today, 2 days, 3 days? Don't forget about your delay discounting stuff, which is the further away you get from the longer delayed the reinforcer is for the behavior, the less the fewer amounts of behavior that thing will maintain. The point is that as you get further away, and so you've got to do this you've got to do X, 500 behaviors before you get the reinforcer. Well, guess what? That's not going to be any good. And when say, hey, you do the behavior today, I'll give you extra recess at the end of the school year. That's not going to do you any good. All right, so you have to be more specific. You have to be cautious with all those types of things with regard to the win. How much of a reward are you going to give? Are you going to give 5 minutes recess, 20 minutes recess, 30 minutes recess? You're going to give $2, $1, $8? You need to be as detailed as possible with these contracts in order for them to be successful. All right. And then probably one of the most important parts here is the task record. Did you achieve it? Right? Did you not achieve it? In what environments did you achieve it? Right? When were you successful? When were you not successful? This creates a feedback loop. If you've been successful, then guess what? Then you're probably earning reinforcers. That hopefully strengthens your likelihood that you're going to continue to be successful. That task record sets the occasion for the behavior to continue to happen, right? Because you've shown that you've been successful in the past to yourself, right? Or to the person that's on the contract. And as you show that success, you can then move on and hopefully get reinforced for it, maybe thin those reinforcers and do other things. Evaluate the darn thing. Probably the most important thing that you can do with a behavioral contract is evaluate whether or not it's working. Did the kid earn the reward or not? Was it too difficult? Did they experience ratio strain? Was it too strict? Did you not give them enough leeway? Did you not allow enough behaviors that would be successful? Remember, it's not always just one behavior. We talk about classes of behaviors, right? So after you answer all those things, those types of questions, then turn around and modify it, right? Did the new behavior, did the behavior that you changed, did that allow access to the goal, or did it not? That's probably it's probably one of the big failure points of behavioral contracts, right? Is that, okay, I want you to do A, B, C, and D, but then in reality, once they do A, B, C, and D, it still didn't work out for them. They still didn't do it didn't give them access to the goal. It wasn't the right behaviors. So you really have to be cautious when you build these things. All right, let's switch gears a little bit and go into token economies. This is just a system for behavior change. It's a pretty big system, but it is a system. And we're going to, first off, when we start doing token economies, we need basically everybody on board. All right, this is a system. You're not going to do a token economy for one kiddo. You're going to do a token economy for the classroom, or a grade level, or an entire school. This is not something you do with a single person. It is way, way, way too much work. Right? You could do it with a single person, but it's a ton of work. So what's the point, right? So typically speaking, we do these as large group sort of things. We get everybody working together. Now, it's not a group contingency. We'll talk about group contingencies in a minute, but it is applied at the group level. It's individual level interventions applied at the group, right? It's an odd sort of way to say it. But you are reinforcing, punishing, so on and so forth, individual behaviors from individual people, but it's happening for everybody all at the same time. Right? So the first thing we need to do with a token economy is list the behaviors that we want to happen. What do we want to happen? What do we want to go away? Right? So a list of target behaviors sometimes includes behaviors that we want to reduce, and we can then set that up as a DRL and things like that within the token economy if you so chose. All right. Then you have to identify your tokens. A lot of people think this is the easy part. I don't. I think it's the hard part. What are you going to use as tokens? Poker chips? Be cautious with that because those are fun on their own, right? Well, we need to be able to exchange those things. The key with token economies is getting this backup, this generalized reinforcer, which is a little token. Could be a bottle cap for all I care. And then you have to turn that into something else, into an actual reinforcer, right? So maybe a toy or something like that. We're going to call those backup reinforcers. But let's assume that you've got this token economy and you decided to use poker chips because you had a bunch of poker chips at home. Well, guess what? Poker chips are kind of fun. Kids will play with them, they'll flip them, they'll trade them, they'll do all sorts of, they want a green one, well mine's chipped so I want this one, and they'll do all these other things, and next thing you know they're playing around with these things and not actually turning them in when they're supposed to. They're not spending them. Also, another problem with using poker chips is that their parents may have some poker chips at home. They may be just like the ones you bought. They're not really specialized anymore. You can get them anywhere. And they all kind of look the same. So, maybe they're going to steal some. Not from you. Maybe they're going to steal it from home and then bring it in. Now they got this bag full of reinforcers that they never really earned. As a result, they're going to be exchanging those for behavior or for backup reinforcers, and guess what? You're not getting that behavior under control at all. So when you choose your tokens, number one, probably the easiest thing is they need to be very durable. If you're using paper stuff like Monopoly money, that's not going to last because this stuff has to survive in an actual economy. The students need to be able to get it. They need to be able to turn it in. They need to be able to put it in their pocket, hold it in their desk, whatever it is. So these things got to be pretty durable. They also have to be not easy to counterfeit. If they're easy to counterfeit, well, then people will counterfeit them. And trust me, kids are savvy. They know how to use a scanner. It's not hard to do. They can use somebody's phone. I mean, kids are crazy with this stuff. They know how to take a picture with a phone. So they walk up, they take a picture, they take that over to the computer, they download GIMP for free on your computer, and then they edit that picture to be the right size and so on and so forth. Then they hit print on your color printer and do it 50 times, and guess what? They just got a whole bunch of reinforcers. So don't make it easy to counterfeit, right? If you are going to use something like poker chips, which, by the way, are a great thing, but there's that problem with people just hoarding them and collecting them for fun, doing other things with them that you want. Put a stamp in the middle of it, so they can't just counterfeit them or go get some from their folks or something like that. There's all sorts of things that could be used as tokens. I've seen people use those little glass marbles, the off-shaped, they're not round ones, I don't know what you call them. I'd call them squished marbles is what they look like to me. The little decorative things that sometimes you put in a piece of glass or something like that, those work as reinforcers. I'm trying to think what else. Anything could work. I mean, I was joking about the bottle caps earlier, but you could do it. There's no reason why you couldn't. And you need to have a lot of these things. There's got to be a ton of them on hand. So imagine you got a class with 30 students. Well, all right, you've got 30 students. You're going to be delivering reinforcers fairly richly early on in the program, so you're thinking a couple of days, so there's 60. Let's assume you're giving kids a pretty rich opportunity to earn these things, so 4 a day. So 30 kids, that's 120 tokens that you're going to give out each day. You're going to turn behavior. You're going to give people opportunities once a week to exchange these things. So you're going to get them back. But that means at least 4 days at 120 days, so 480 plus a bunch of backups for when stuff gets broken, lost, whatever. So you're looking at 500, 600 of these little tokens that you need to start out a project, and that's not even a good system. I'd started out with 1,000 or 2,000 tokens in my bin, if you will, because people will hoard them, they will keep them, they will not turn them in, they'll do all sorts of stuff. They'll forget them at home, they'll do whatever, and you're going to need more. And absolutely, one of the things you cannot do in a token economy is run out of tokens. Right? Of course, we also need to worry about backup reinforcers. What are the reinforcers that you're going to exchange these tokens for? It could be anything from pencils to Gumby toys to jacks to whatever, right? It could be anything. Erasers, it could be even bigger stuff, maybe time in the library or time at on recess, or opportunity to help the teacher with X. Sometimes kids want to buy those or want to support the teacher. Maybe doing a science project, or keeping a class on task, or being the assistant for the day, or whatever. Who knows what it is that you might want them to do, that you could have them exchange that for. And don't forget that backup reinforcers don't have to be tangible reinforcers. It could be activity-based reinforcers as well. There's no reason why you can't have the kids do something along those lines. All right, well, there's levels. We're going to start with lots of reinforcement. Lots and lots and lots. Easy to do, easy to earn the reinforcers, easy to move on, right? Remember, when we're trying to train a new behavior, we always start out rich, right? So with lots of reinforcement for that behavior, then we thin it as they start to achieve their goals, right? And the goals specifically are going to be particular behaviors or repertoires. Once they can do these certain things, then we can start to thin it out. The last level, the last step, and there's never just 3 steps here. This should be 4, 5, 10, 12 different layers of this, right? So the last step is very thin, right? Ultimately, the idea here is to get rid of all those tokens. You don't want the kids to have to be exchanging them anymore. You want those things to be thinned out to the point to where the natural reinforcers have taken over, whether those are social or automatic or whatever. But you do want those. You do want to thin this out. So you start with a lot of these contrived reinforcers, a lot of the tokens, and as people achieve the goals that you want them to achieve, then you just start pulling it back. Well, how do you pull this thing back? Well, there's a couple of different things that I'll probably talk about in a bit, but it's relevant now, so I'll talk about them now. You can increase the price of items. Okay, that means it takes more tokens to buy those items. So in other words, you're thinning the schedule because they have to work harder to get the same thing that they got before. You can give fewer tokens, right? So you don't have to give as many. Maybe now that you're just, instead of catching every single behavior that they're doing, you're catching every 4th or 5th time they're doing it right, and you're dropping a token in their lap. That's effectively thinning the schedule. You can combine those two. So first you thin the schedule in terms of the number of tokens you're giving, then you thin the schedule in terms of how much stuff costs. In other words, you increase the cost. And then you combine those two things, and you make them work harder for it, and you make it cost more at the same time. You can delay the times at which they turn these things in, so their purchase times, if you will, or their exchange periods, or whatever you want to call them. Right? So you can delay that. Instead of doing it every week, you do it every other week, or once a month. All sorts of stuff that you can do there. But ultimately, the goal is to thin this out to the point to where it's natural, if at all possible. Now, I've already talked about some of this. Simple object or symbol. Symbols meaning it could be a sticker or something like that, and there's an easy way to record this stuff. It could be, I'm trying to think of an example. Oh, coffee shops. Sometimes they have different symbols. They have different hole punches. They use a heart instead of a round hole punch or something, so that way somebody can't easily copy it. Right? Durable. They're going, like I've said before, they're going to be used. Attractive. It must not be something that's just stupid, right? It must look a little bit professional. Easy to deliver. You should be able to have pockets full of these things, right? And if it's a stamp, it's even easier. You can just walk up and hit a stamp on a kid's piece of paper or something. Up, you catch a token, right? Then you don't have to keep a pocket full. You just got to keep a stamp around. And do your best to avoid counterfeiting. A buddy of mine in high school used to work at, I think it was Godfather's Pizza. And back then, Godfather's Pizza used to have this lunch club sort of thing, right? Just like a coffee stand. You buy 10 lunch buffets and you get your 11th one free or whatever. So what did he do? He went and he figured out what kind of paper they were using to make those. And he worked there, mind you. So he stole a few of these things and he figured out what paper that they were using, which was just a heavy construction paper type thing. And he went and printed off thousands of sheets of these things. And then when he would be at work, at night or whatever, he would just start stamping these things. And then he would sell each one of these individual little, coupon cards, if you will, sell them for $1 or $2 each, right? Because they were worth about $5, because that's about how much lunch would cost. Because you'd get, the pizza, 4 slices of pizza and a drink or whatever the cost was. I don't recall the details. But the point is that he used to show up at high school with stacks of these things. Just stacks, and he'd sell them all over the high school. Eventually, Godfathers caught on to the fact that somebody was counterfeiting their tokens and exchanging them for backup reinforcers, in other words, pizza, and they changed it up a little bit, got rid of the program, and did some other things as well, and subsequently he lost his job. But the point is a kind of a funny example of one where counterfeiting is an obvious issue, right? So he counterfeited those tokens, sold those tokens separately, made a ton of money off of it on his own, which is more power to him there, but of course it was illegal, and then the whole system kind of fell apart. So because he was selling these things to just 10, 20 people or more, how many ever people were at the school that were buying them. I don't know everybody that was buying them, but so he was selling these things, and he ruined the entire he ruined the entire economy for everybody, right? Because the program went away. So avoid the counterfeiting, not basically make it hard to counterfeit them. Well, what target behaviors do you want? Must be observable and measurable, because you or the teacher or somebody has to watch it. Right? Clearly specify the criteria that you want to happen. Right? If you don't clearly specify this stuff, if you don't put the rules on the wall, if not anybody understands, then you're going to have just a hard time managing everything in general. Then you want to break this up into individual pieces, right? So start with a few easy behaviors. Make it easy for them to get reinforcers. This is the rich part that we talked about. Then increase the quantity of behaviors and increase the difficulty with which they need to engage in those behaviors. Right? Make sure this behavior is in the individual's repertoire. If it's not, guess what? It's going to fail. If they can't do the work, then they can't do the work, right? Then you're going to have to go through a shaping process and all that stuff, and that's not what you're after. You want to get these kids behaving appropriately in the classroom or increasing their success or whatever the case may be. And again, so the skill has to be something they can already do, or at least really close to what they can already do, or something that they're going to learn anyway along the way. But you typically don't use a token economy to teach new behavior. You use the token economy to strengthen existing behaviors, right? Or increase the probability, and you make the entire system function smooth. In a sense, you're establishing what's called a meta contingency, and we're never going to talk about those. So make sure, if you want to know more about meta contingencies, that you ask me in a separate environment, not necessarily in class, but anywhere you want, basically. So, all right, individual contingencies. Here we go. You can set up individual behaviors, so each kid has their own behaviors that they want to do. That's a lot of work, right? So usually what you see in the classrooms is the group contingency approach, where everybody has to do certain things. I will catch everybody doing well, and I'm reinforcing each person individually, but at least the goals and the procedures are the same for everybody involved. Individual contingencies are useful in maybe some hospital settings, and it can even be useful in a school setting. It's just a lot of work to set up each one of those individual goals and behaviors for the kids. Now, it may be that all 30 kids have 5 goals in common, and each kid has one of their own goal. Fine, that works too. That's probably a more realistic, sort of easy way to manage, to use that individual contingency approach and combine it with the group contingency. Let's see, what else can we do here? Oh, all right. So, that was it. What are we going to do for backup reinforcers? Activities at the classroom, in the school. tangible reinforcers, right? So let's think about some of those activities that kids might be able to do in the classroom. Like I said earlier, they could help out the teacher. They could, maybe if there's a classroom pet, maybe they can take care of it for this week, or feed the fish, or whatever it is. Something that they wouldn't normally get to do, but they'll get to exchange this for something. Activities in the school in general. I got lucky for whatever reason, and I'd already had this chemistry class, and this was in high school, junior high, and I'd already had my basic chemistry, and I'd switched schools, and so I was a year ahead in terms of the sciences. And so one of the things that the teachers allowed me to do was set up all the chem labs, right? So I was able to go along and during my 0-hour time, or whatever time it was that was originally supposed to be in class taking chemistry, I would use that time to set up the experiments and things like that for everybody else. So that was something that I got to do that was kind of fun, and so that was an activity in the school. It wasn't necessarily in the classroom, it was across the board in the school. Maybe doing different things, being the person that gets to do the announcements, the daily announcements, or something like that. Who knows? But the point is, be creative with this, and just like what we've talked about before, how do you find out what what is a behavior that might be reinforcing for somebody, or what's a thing that might be reinforcing somebody? Ask them. Come up with a list, right? And then make sure you can, as a teacher or whatever, can afford those things to bring them into the classroom. But ultimately speaking, we want to ask the participants what they would like to get out of this stuff. Ratios of exchange. How do we exchange these tokens for actual things, right? So low ratios of exchange. In other words, really easy to exchange things. Okay? Stuff isn't very expensive, and you give lots of opportunities to go to the school store. Okay? Again, as we talked about earlier, increase the costs, devalue the tokens. You can increase backup item choices, right? So giving people more options is something that you want to do. That way they can start to they can learn to start saving up. They may like that. They may like saving up and getting that bigger thing. So having all these different values on these things. And here's a fun one. This one tends to maintain a lot of behavior, and it sounds kind of mean, but take the items that are necessary, items that they need, right, and make them more expensive. Because then they have to work harder for those particular items. They have to save for those particular items. And it will, because they're necessary items that they may need, then they would be something that they would be likely to work for. Right? So it really increases the value of the reinforcers, if you will. So that's a type of motivating operation there, by making those necessary items more expensive. And again, as I was saying earlier, make sure you thin all that stuff out and change those things, increase cost, devalue tokens, etc. As you go along. Implementing a token economy. Well, everybody's got to be trained. All the teachers, all the assistants, other school staff, participants need to be verbal, and they have to have practice at this stuff. This is not as simple, we're just going to start a token economy today. It's big. You've got to have plans in place. Well, how often are you going to exchange? I have to come up with I have to give this as an example, because there's too many things to think about if I just try to think about them outright. So let me give you an example. Let's say we're going to take a school, and we're going to put them on a token economy. An entire school, elementary school. Not a bad idea. Got to set up a school store. Okay, no big deal. Got to have thousands and thousands of tokens. Okay, no big deal. All right. Who's going to give the tokens? The teachers? The assistants? Principal? Vice principal? Nurse? Just anybody walking down that catches the student doing well, because token economies are all about catching people doing well. Right? So everybody needs to know what's going on. Everybody needs to know that behavior gets 2 tokens this week. Next week, that behavior gets 1 token. Everybody's got to be on board. If any one person is not on board that's part of that token system, that token economy, then the thing starts to fall apart, because you get somebody that's not doing it right and isn't following the procedures. Right? So before you start saying, thinking that token economies are panaceas, and that they can help you dramatically, which they can, and they're not necessarily panaceas, but they're great systems, realize that you've got to get everybody on board, and you got to train them. And this all happens before you start the token economy. So if you're doing this in a reactionary sort of sense, then you're in trouble, because it's going to take you several months to get all this stuff organized and rolling. So this is something I tend to think of token economies as preventative measures. All right. So anyway, back to the example. We got an entire school on set up on a token economy. So how often are we going to set up a school store? So are we going? How often are we going to do that? How often do kids get access to the school store? Is it something that they can do every day? Can they buy something every day if they want? I've heard of that being done. The school store is always open from time A to time B, whatever those are. Right? If you so choose to spend your tokens in that store today, fine, you can. Right? You may put rules on how long they can save their tokens for, because some kids will just hoard tokens, which is a problem. But that's okay. Ultimately you can kind of force them to spend those things, but people will do it. So you can put rules on that. You have to spend X numbers of your tokens by a certain amount of time. In other words, the most expensive thing you can save up for will cost you 30 tokens, let's say. Right? So if you got a kid that's got 90 tokens, what's he doing? Why is he hanging on to those? There's probably something self-reinforcing about just earning the tokens, which, in a sense, let them be, because it may actually be working. But ultimately, you want that person to participate in the economy and then buy the things that they're supposed to as a result of participating. Oh, let's see, what else? Who's going to pay for these items that you're going to stock as part of your class? Are you, the school psychologist, is it part of your budget? How about the teacher? Is it part of their budget? Or is it something they're supposed to provide on their own, out of pocket? Is the principal going to provide it? Who's going to actually fund this stuff? We're not talking about an inexpensive endeavor here. The tokens have to be purchased. The training manuals have to be produced. The training has to happen. All the backup reinforcers need to be purchased and maintained, and up to you have to have continued stock of all these things, right? So you got tons of stuff that you've got to worry about here. Are you going to have the kids exchange these things every Friday? You're going to have them exchange them all the time? So you've got those questions that arise, and of course, when do you give them access to those exchange periods? Is it going to occur during a recess? Or are you going to take class time away to make it happen? So there's a ton of different things. I've even heard of people doing token economies online. Kids save them. You update your student system, whatever it may be, and say, oh, I've got 50, kiddo X has 15 tokens this week, and then they can actually buy something online and click the button and say, oh, okay, that's spent my tokens. There's no reason why you couldn't do that, right? But when are they going to do it? When do you deliver the backup reinforcers? Are there enough available for everybody? Let's say everybody wants to turn in all their tokens today. Are there enough backup reinforcers of every type to support everybody buying all the same type? So who knows? Lots of questions that you have to deal with here. Are your participants verbal? If so, then give them the rules. Make it clear and make them practice this stuff. The more they practice, a little bit of early practice here is going to go a long way, because they're going to understand that token economy. So just a couple of days, maybe a week's worth of practice, and then you can roll this whole thing out. That's after you've done all the other stuff I already talked about. When you're doing this training, make sure you model the token delivery. Show people how you want those tokens delivered, quickly, efficiently, and without disruption. Ultimately, you want to walk up to the kiddo and drop the token on their desk when they've done the right thing and just say, hey, good job, I appreciate it. Okay, here you earned your token. Okay. Then for the participants, model the token exchange. So show them how to, this is that practice part I was telling you about, right? So model that token exchange. Show them how you want them to behave. How do they exchange their tokens? Do they, and how about the people that are selling the items, so to speak? How do they receive the tokens? This whole thing has to be done. And repeat the process. Ongoing. Because you're going to get new people, new assistants, new paras, whatever the case may be. They're going to be bouncing in and out and changing around. You always have to run these ongoing training sessions. Rotating who's running the store. Heck, that might even be one of the reinforcers. You buy the opportunity to run the exchange store on every Friday. You get it to do it for 2 weeks when you buy it, or something like that. So you're going to have to continually train people. You have to be ready for that. What else do we do with these things? Well, fade them out over time. We do not want to leave the token economy in place forever. The only token economy in place forever that I can think of is our basic monetary system across the planet. Okay? It's not going anywhere. We're going to continue to use that. But that's the only type of one we want around. Right? Token economies in the classroom, they need to be present to get the behaviors under control, get them in touch, and then fade them out to get them in touch with the natural reinforcers. All of a sudden, you've selected for new cultural type behaviors within that context. Right? And as I look ahead, I see this funny one. Praise the tokens with praise. First off, I don't know why you would praise tokens, so I think that means pair the tokens with praise. So we're going to pair tokens with praise. Hopefully that adds some sort of reinforcing value to it. Research is a mixed bag here. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it never hurts. So it's always a good idea, at least in the research. So it's always a good idea to praise kiddos when they've done well. A little harder with older kids because they may think you're patronizing them. You know, you're getting into the junior high level or older. They may sort of react to that praise, but you just have to. If you're already working with those kids, you know how to praise them, right? So just be genuine. Don't patronize people when you are praising them, and tell them what they did right. Be specific about your praise. Be specific about the praise when you deliver the tokens. Again, increase the effort. In other words, thin the schedule. Decrease the time it's in effect. You know, keep this thing. How long is it going to run for? Slowly. Ultimately, we don't want it to be in effect forever. We do want this thing to end. Right? Remove tangible items. Right? Get rid of those things. Exchange them for appropriate behaviors that kids should be doing. Right? This is where I like to think about the activity-based reinforcers. Any volunteer position that exists within a school, you should be able to put that into the token economy. Systematically increase the price. Fade the token itself. In other words, get rid of it. Don't give them very often. Reduce the amount of times that you're giving them. And evaluate. Has it been effective? Has it not? Have you met your goals? Have you not met your goals? Why? Why not? Basically, go back and do an FBA on your token economy. So again, token economy is extremely useful. I love them. I think they're awesome. They're hard to implement. I've done it in several locations, and they're never easy, right? But they tend to be highly effective, and you can use them with almost any population. You can use them with people that are developmentally delayed. You can use them with autistic kiddos. You can use kids with autism. You can use it with normal kids. You can use it with high achieving kids. You can use it with underachieving kids. It's a great system, and the good thing is we only talked about the positive reinforcer side of these things. There's no reason why inappropriate behavior can't be punished. You could take tokens away for inappropriate behavior. Very common thing, should be done. Right? And ultimately, you want this to be like the real world, if at all possible. And then again, fade this thing, fade. You don't want it to be in place forever. Let's assume you're going to do a token economy for the school year. That token economy should disappear by the middle of the spring quarter. You don't want that around anymore. You got to give yourself a window there because you may need to extend it. But that's why I say gone by the middle of spring, not just right before summer break, because then you've got no window, right? But you always want to try to get these behaviors, whatever they are, maintained by natural contingencies. All right, let's see what else. Nope. Let's just move on to group contingencies. These things are both cruel and effective and fun and awesome and awful all at the same time. It depends on who you're talking to, and depends on which aspect of the programs you're looking at. Okay, with group contingencies, reinforcer is delivered to a group. Okay, but however, it is contingent on one person's behavior. Sounds kind of like the military, right? Because that's the idea. Okay. One person has to do the right thing, and everybody earns a reward for it. That's one way to do this. Another way to do this is we can require everybody to do a minimum level of tasks, and then one person, or then everybody earns the reinforcers. So everybody doing it, or nobody gets it, or one person does it and everybody gets it. You can probably assume when you do the one person thing, when you got one kid that's way out of line, and you got to get them, you got to add those social components in there to get them away, to try and get their behavior under control. In other words, you're basically using other people to manage their behavior. All right. These things do save time. And they save time because it's impractical to do these entire behavioral training programs in a standard classroom on more than one kiddo at a time. It is hard to do one of these programs that we've been talking about all quarter long. It's even harder to do it with 2 or 3 or 4 kids all at once. So you use these group contingencies to help manage the overall system. Right? And we use the peers to help change the kiddo's behavior. Right? So let's break it down into the two types of group contingencies that generally exist. The independent group contingency, it's one contingency for the group. And reinforcers are delivered to individuals. Everybody has the same rule. This is much like a token economy, right? So everybody has the same rule, and individuals get earn rewards. Okay? So again, it's the rule that's standardized across everybody. We all want to share properly, and then I'll catch people doing well once in a while. Okay? Then we have the dependent group contingencies. Right? Here's where we reward the group based on a single person's response. Watch any old military movie. That's all I have to say. Okay, so once one person gets up to speed, so to speak, right? Maybe through the help of their peers or whatever, but once that one person gets up to speed, everybody earns something. Right? So if little Johnny can stay on task all morning long, then everybody will get 5 minutes extra recess. Very, very effective sort of tool to use. Why? Because it institutes peer control. It gets that, what do you call it? It sets up a more natural environment, a more social type setting, which is the way our generally society functions, right? That we tend to maintain each other's behavior and tend to keep each other in line. Say, hey, that wasn't appropriate, or whatever the case may be, or yell at somebody because you didn't like what they said. Maybe not even yell. Just address issues with people as they get out of line, so to speak. This is the same type of thing. It's teaching people how to function in that environment. Some people don't like this stuff, but if you're focusing on the reward side of things, it's much, much more effective than trying to do individual reinforcers with this kiddo that you're having crazy amounts of problems with, because you don't, as the teacher, they wouldn't have the time to really invest in that one kiddo. Right? And it's sad to say that, but they really don't. If we're talking about classrooms with 10 kids. We don't have to worry about this dependent group contingency thing. But if you got a classroom with 30 kids, yeah, maybe it's going to save you a lot of time. Right? Interdependent group contingencies. These ones are pretty cool. All members meet an individual criteria, and then the reward is delivered to everyone. So everybody has to get to a certain level, and then they all get the reward. Right? You can have the total group criterion, which is what I just talked about. Everyone must meet it, right? And then everybody gets it. You can do the group average. On average, the group met the criteria, and then everybody gets a reinforcer. Your book's got a couple of good examples about both of these. The group average one is fun. Think about using that for exams. Okay, I know the research has been done. I know you can do it. It's been effective in the past, so why not do it again? Okay, we're going to start out. Everybody's going to earn 4 minutes extra recess if the average class score is above a 70%. And then next week it's got to be above a 75. And the week after that it's got to be above an 80, so on and so forth. Right? So you can force the kiddos to start learning more and working harder as you go on. Right? Good behavior game. Right? Take the class, split them in half. Right? The group that outperforms the other group wins. Right? And they get their reinforcers, whatever that may be. Right? If everybody can win if they all achieve a particular level. Right? So the point is that I've been talking about this tool bag, so to speak, where you've got all these different skills that you can use, and you can implement them independently. You can treat them like a toolbox, right? So you can reach in, grab the tool you need, and then put it away. You don't need it anymore. Or you can grab a different tool next week, and those types of things. Or you can also look at these tools as kind of interlocking devices that will make a new tool, if you will. If you use them all together, right, you can create this other new tool, and that's what these last two components have been about, is that token economy really does put everything together. You can use extinction, you can use punishment, you can use reinforcement, you can use SDs, you can use MOs, you can do all that stuff, and you should do all that stuff in a token economy. Right? So the token economy uses all those individual pieces that we've talked about all quarter long. Right? Group contingencies do the same thing. I'm just presenting to you the reinforcing side of group contingencies. There's no reason you couldn't use it the other way around. I'd prefer you didn't. Okay? At least I would prefer you spend more time focusing on the positive behavior or appropriate behavior group contingency rather than the inappropriate one. So strengthening particular responses. So, but again, you're going to use reinforcement. You can use punishment. You can do all sorts of stuff with these things. So when you put all this stuff together, you end up with these systems. So don't forget that it's not just a bag of tricks. All this stuff goes together. And when you start to think about society, right? Now, how does society function? Well, you can really break that down into each one of these individual little components. And like I said a few minutes ago, society functions on a gigantic token economy, right? I mean, in a nutshell, you get these funny little things called greenbacks, or euros, or Afghani, or shillings, or dollars, or whatever you get, and you can exchange those for goods and services. Or, geez, you can even exchange them for activity. Want to go for a ride in space? Sure, you can do that. Cost you a couple $100,000, but you can do it. Right? So the point is that we do want to get this stuff set up to a natural environment. So we always want to try to get these things back to a natural sort of setting, right? And making it be as normal, quote unquote, as possible. In other words, we need to get rid of our contrived system. Put our system in place to get behavior under control, and then as behavior gets under control, we want to get rid of our system, right? And let that natural system take over. And that natural system is what we're always trying to fade this out to. So always keep that in mind. How are we going to get from a rich set of reinforcers out to this sort of very rare reinforcement in terms of tangible stuff, but there may be a lot of social reinforcers, right? How are you going to bridge those gaps? How are you going to get those together? And that's a difficult thing to ask, and there's no real rule about how to do it. You just have to watch. You have to start running your token economy or your group contingency, and you need to see what's happening with behavior, and then just start to thin that stuff out. And if you thin it out too far, you'll know right away. Because the behavior will go willy-nilly, you'll lose control, and people will whine and complain and all those types of things. So, all right, that's about it for the special topic stuff, and we'll come back again and talk about, generalization issues. So, take care.